If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you'll say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. Mustard seeds, because of our reading today, are looked upon as being the smallest seeds, and they might be in Palestine. But a lifetime ago, I dealt with smaller seeds. We had a little sun trap at the back door of the house, and brickwork and concrete step. It absorbed heat and reflected it, and nothing would grow there except cacti. So we had cacti. We had a golden orb. There's one showing. It cost us a mint when we bought it. They're very slow growing, and in Mexico they're looked upon as a very good source of food. But the one we had most of was the mammillaria, the one with the pink flowers. Mammillaria grow quite well, and they have that spectacular burst of flower once a year. Now, they also set seeds, and being challenged to grow some seeds from the mammillaria, I set about doing just that. And here's a little video of collecting seeds from the mammillaria. In Mexico, there are birds that go and pull the seed pods out.
So you'll know if it doesn't come away easy, then you know that it's not ready to actually harvest. It comes away easy like that, as you can see there. And what I've done here, I've got a little paper towel because mammillaria fruit is juicy and it has got fruit. It is fruit inside. I have to then spread this across, wait for it to dry, and then the seed will come away easily. Some cactus seeds, for example, Astrophyta, will just form into a dry seed pod, and then the seed just comes out pretty much dry. But with mammillaria and a lot of the cacti, it has actually formed into all the juicy fruit. As it comes out, if it doesn't come out easy, then I definitely would leave it on for longer. And here we go here. If you don't look at spines, obviously. Oh, this comes out really easy, like a sheep. Very good there. And as you can see, you can actually see the seed in there. I'll show you a bit in there also. And then what I'm going to do then is I'm going to split these open and then spread them across on the paper towel to allow them to dry. Now this actually has got a couple more seed pods just forming right underneath, for example, but they're not ready yet. They'll suddenly pop up probably the next few days and carry on harvesting them. But that's 3 there. I'm going to show you then how to separate the seed from the pulp. Right there. So there's the 3 seeds here. You just need to split the pod. Now you can use a little tiny sharp object. In this case, I'm going to use my thumbs. Just split it open. And as I say, yeah, the fruit is edible. So you can even eat the little fruit after you've got the seed. Look at the seed in there, guys. Isn't that great? And all you do, I find the easiest way is you just spread it across onto the paper towel. The white paper towel is easier because you can see the seeds easier there. Yeah. A little bit more. This one, so the seeds are really tiny, and I wouldn't recommend doing this outside. I'd do it indoors because even on a really calm day when there's not much wind, you'd be surprised these seeds are so light that they'll just blow away. They really will. So do this in a indoors, not outside where the wind can blow them away. So that's the one done there. Just leave that aside. And then spread it out. So you just want to spread them out. And this will dry probably in a probably half an hour, it'll be totally dry, and then I can rub it and separate away from the towel. Quite a lot of seed in there, tiny part. Then there's this one here, again, you crack it open. Yeah, lovely juicy fruit. And people said, what do cactus fruit taste like? Well, they all taste a bit different. I have tasted quite a few over the years. Mammillaria fruit is usually a little bit like berries, a bit like a raspberry. Sometimes they can be quite tasteless, it just depends, but they usually are a little bit sweet. So yeah, a little more seed on there also. I love harvesting seeds.
Well, as you can see, you've got to use tweezers. Pull them out of the top of the cacti, the mammillaria, and then spread them out. The juicy bit on the inside of that seed pod is quite tasty, but the birds love it in Mexico, and that's why they pull it out and eat it, and they scatter the seeds. Well, I planted the seeds on top of a tray of sand. When I'd planted them on top of this tray of sand, I couldn't see where they were. But a few months later, some of the grains of sand started to get a greenish tinge and started to swell. So that was all right. About 12 months later, I was able to pick up the little cacti. By that stage, they were about the size of the mustard seed, and I put each of them into a pot on their own, where they'd spend the rest of their lives. What? Yeah, I wanted that out. It was a bit different with the eucalypt seeds. You can get a gum nut and shake it, and the seeds come out once it's dry. And half of what comes out of a gum nut is packing, just the leftover bits from the flower, and a bit of it is seed. And you have to plant all the packing as well as the seed, because you can't sort out which is which. Out in the bush, the eucalypt drops its seeds around the base of the tree, and so you see a parent tree and it's surrounded by young saplings. I had a collection of gum nuts, so I shook them out and got some, planted them, and there was one that was viable seed, and when it was about 6 inches high, I planted it out in the garden, thinking that I had a small one of a beautiful flowering gum that my father was very proud of at home. But it should have grown into a nice little shade tree in the middle of the back garden. But instead of that, after a while, it was 40 foot high and still growing. What I'd planted was a blue gum. Well, it meant that I spent a whole Saturday cutting it down and cutting it to the tip, apart from the main trunk, which I kept to use as garden edging. It only lasted about 12 months. The witchetty grubs loved it. They got into it, and then the water got into it and it rotted. No wonder blue gum trees make such good copy paper, or at least they used to. that industry's now gone since our esteemed Premier closed the Gippsland forests, and the paper mill at Maryvale has had to shut down its production line for copy paper. But you didn't come today for a talk on propagation of plants, or how a farmer I did some work for paid for his annual holidays by planting all the prunings from his rose bushes. At least I did most of the planting. He got me to run a furrow along the edge of the creek bank in beautiful soil, and then we set the cuttings into the furrow. And then I ran another furrow along and covered the bottom half of the prunings with another layer of soil. And a couple of months later, they'd all struck roots and lovely spring growth on them. So we dug them up and bundled them up. The worst part of it was putting tags on them to say which particular rose they were. But he sold them. I sold a lot. Didn't go through his tax returns, of course. But that was that. But if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it'll move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Just a little bit of faith, but it has to be put to work. No good staying in the gumnut. Seed must be set free and planted to have a chance of growing. It's the same with your faith. It must be put into action if it's to have any chance of bearing fruit. And that's the challenge that we all face every day. When everything seems to be going wrong, sickness, difficulties at work or with family relationships, when we're discouraged, it's then that we need to dig a little bit deeper and through faith claim the promises of God. What? In Hebrews, the writer says, faith is the substance of things hoped for. Everything's happening. We had visitors there, and I went to get out of the chair to put the kettle on for afternoon tea. I couldn't get out of the chair. So Betty helped me up. The legs didn't hold me, and I just collapsed onto the floor. And the friend who was there then helped Betty get me into the car. She was going to rush me to the hospital because she thought I was having a stroke. When we got to the hospital, they said, why didn't you call an ambulance? We said, well, just the other week we called an ambulance for a lady just up the road. After an hour and a half, the ambulance still hadn't arrived. So it was only 10 minutes from home to the hospital. Well, they decided I might have had an infection because it wasn't a stroke. It was affecting both sides, both hands, both feet. And so they started doing tests. I did tests all that day and the next day. I was getting worse and worse. Betty was having to feed me. And so she demanded that they do some more tests. So they did a CT scan and found that I had 2 subdural hematomas, one either side of the head pressing in on the brain. That's subdural hematoma is a clot of blood between the brain and the skull. And Bet asked, what are they going to do about it? And Doctor said, well, we remove it. Bet had the idea that they'd probably put a needle in and suck the blood out. He said, no, it's got to be done by a neurosurgeon. And so that's got to be in Melbourne. So on Friday the 22nd of June, they found a bed in Epworth, Melbourne. Oh, being prompted.
Well, I've got the slides here, come on.
I went into intensive care the night before. Friday the 22nd, they found a bed in Epworth, Richmond, arranged for the surgeon, then they had to arrange for an ambulance, and finally they carted me down to Melbourne. I don't remember anything of the trip, except the cold wind as they transferred me from the hospital to the ambulance. We arrived at Epworth mid-afternoon, and the registrar came in later and carried out some tests. Push with your hands, push with your feet. Can you wriggle your toes? No. Where are you? Home in bed. What day is it? What year is it? Well, I had a guess at the years. I started, I think, at about 2008 and went through to 2020 and missed 2012. Anyway, by late afternoon I was on oxygen, and about 7:30 at night, so I'm told, the neurosurgeon came in and said that he'd seen my scans, and if I wasn't in theatre in 15 minutes, I wouldn't be there in the morning. I do remember lots of action. Wheeled out along the passage, into the lift and up to the theatre level. Betty following along beside me and signing various documents for the doctor, and then she helped me to pray, handing myself over to Jesus and trusting him. Betty had asked the surgeon if he was a believer, and he said yes. So he told her that, or she told him that she had sent out requests for prayer to a number of our friends and relatives. He asked for a mobile phone number and assured her that in a short while he'd ring her and tell her that I'd be okay. That was before he started the operation. As I was anaesthetised, I heard the registrar complain to the surgeon that it wasn't fair that she never got to drill the holes. He said, maybe next time. This one's a bit tricky. I woke up in intensive care. And not long afterwards, Betty came in with a woman we'd known in Ballarat. She turned out to be a chaplain at the hospital. Later I got a nurse to get me a mirror so that I could see what I looked like, because I knew I had these two tubes coming out of my head, and I'd looked over the side of my bed and saw they went to a big plastic bag beside the bed, and the only mirror she had was her makeup mirror, which was magnifying. I look queer in the makeup mirror. Anyway, they drained out 250 lots of blood, one from either side of the head, a total of 500 mils, and I didn't have a headache. I had to learn to walk again, and after transfer back to St John of God Hospital in Ballarat, had lots of physio and exercises before I was discharged. And I see some pictures there. We trusted God to bring me through the operation, and the intensive care nurse at Epworth told Betty that it was a miracle I didn't have any brain damage. Our mustard seed faith had sufficed. Our Saviour answered our prayer, and I'm here today. A week or so later, after I got out of hospital, I was chairing a congregational meeting. I did sit down. And 6 months later, on my 80th birthday, we had a cruise, and that's a photo of me on the cruise, with the dents in the top of my head, which are still there. All we need to do is put our faith into action. We all need to pause in our busy day, and where we're constantly too busy to take stock of who we are and who we've become and what it is that we really believe. The disciples were so busy following Jesus that they had not had time to process his teaching. So he rebuked them for their lack of faith. He told them they only needed a mustard seed of faith and they could move mountains. So how's our faith? You can see there the mustard seed between the fingers. Are there problems in your life that need moving? Do you know other people with problem mountains who need encouragement to really activate their faith? Can you help someone else today to renew their faith, or even find a faith they've never had? It's time for us all to put our faith into action. Jesus said to the disciples, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could move mountains, and nothing would be impossible to you. So what's holding us back? What do you have to do to empower our witness to the community? It's a matter of putting our faith into action. We'll see miracles happen and souls saved. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith isn't believing God can, but knowing he will. Amen.